somewhere deep in the folded hills of the American heartland, where the tree canopy closes over old logging roads and the fog settles into hollows like something alive, people have been hearing a sound they cannot explain. It isn't quite a howl, it isn't quite a scream. It sits somewhere between the bugle of an elk and the hysterical laugh of a hyena, a sound that seems to belong to no animal anyone has ever cataloged, no field guide ever printed. And the people who hear it don't forget it. They describe the same thing, decade after decade, county after county, a noise that makes the back of your neck go cold and your feet want to move before your brain gives the order. This is the story of the Ozark Howler. The Ozarks are one of the oldest mountain systems in North America. They stretch across southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, and into the corner of Kansas, covering roughly 47,000 square miles of rugged, heavily forested terrain. These are not the dramatic, photogenic peaks of the Rockies. They are ancient, worn down, intimate. The hills are dense and dark with oak and hickory. The valleys hold rivers that run cold even in summer. There are caves here that have never been fully mapped and hollows that haven't had a human footprint in them for decades. If something wanted to stay hidden in America, the Ozarks would be a reasonable place to try. The people who have lived here across the centuries knew that. The indigenous nations who called this land home long before European contact spoke of powerful spirits that dwelled in the wilderness, forces that were neither entirely animal nor entirely supernatural. Some researchers who have studied these oral traditions believe the creature now called the Ozark Howler may share roots with those older stories, a shape-shifting protector of the forest, something that existed at the boundary between the natural world and whatever lies beyond it. When European settlers arrived, they brought their own traditions with them, particularly from the British Isles and Ireland, where stories of dark, glowing-eyed beasts had circulated for centuries. The Black Shuck of East Anglia, the Church Grim, the Jitrash of northern England. These were all enormous black creatures with eyes that burned red or green, creatures that served as omens of death and disaster. Folklorists who study the Ozark Howler have noted that the parallels are striking, almost too precise to be coincidental. It's possible that Irish and British immigrants arriving in the Ozarks in the 1800s imported their supernatural fears, and those fears found a new home in a new landscape, attaching themselves to something that may have already been there, already being heard. A folkloric tale, popularized in later retellings, claims Daniel Boone killed a large creature called a Yahoo during his Missouri explorations in the early 1800s. Whether that story has been polished and embellished over 2 centuries of retelling is impossible to say. What is documented is that by the mid-20th century, reports of an unidentified creature in the Ozarks had become common enough that they started being written down, filed, and collected by researchers. The first wave of modern sightings picked up in the 1950s, mostly from hunters and farmers in rural Missouri and Arkansas. The accounts followed a consistent pattern. A large animal, roughly bear-sized, moving on 4 legs, covered in thick dark fur, sometimes described as black, sometimes as very dark gray. In many reports, the witness noted glowing red eyes, the kind that seem to catch light that isn't there. And in nearly every account, the creature made a sound that the witness struggled to put into words afterward: deep, resonant, wrong. One of the most frequently cited categories of physical evidence involves tracks. Over the decades, reports of unusually large non-canine tracks have surfaced periodically in muddy riverbeds and soft earth within the Ozark region, prints described as being significantly larger than a wolf's and sometimes bearing strange claw marks or an unusual gait. Without casts that were taken and properly preserved, this kind of evidence is hard to evaluate decades later, but the consistency of the descriptions across different counties and different decades is at least worth noting. Then there's the 1998 incident, which became something of a turning point in the Howler's modern history, though not in the way enthusiasts hoped. A wave of emails began circulating among cryptozoology researchers, claiming new evidence of the creature and soliciting further reports. The emails had an air of legitimacy, the kind of careful language that reads like a researcher doing serious work. But when investigators like Chad Arment, a respected figure in the cryptozoology community, looked into where those messages were originating, they traced them back to a University of Arkansas student who had made a bet that he could fool the cryptozoological research community. The student won the bet. Arment exposed the 1998 hoax in his research, but treated the Howler as folklore rather than declaring the entire myth fabricated. This represents one of the genuine challenges in investigating any cryptid. One high-profile hoax contaminates the entire conversation. People who might otherwise come forward with serious accounts stay quiet because they don't want to be associated with something that's been publicly mocked. And skeptics point to the hoax as proof that the whole thing is fabricated, ignoring the fact that the hoax came after generations of independent sightings that no one connected to a college prank, because the sightings did not stop. They have never stopped. A notable cluster of reports emerged from northeast Arkansas between 2005 and 2010. These came from multiple independent witnesses across a broad geographic area, people who did not know each other and were not comparing notes online before making their reports. Hikers in remote parts of the Ouachita National Forest reported hearing deep, resonant growls and piercing screams that defied any known animal, and some individuals claimed to see glimpses of a hulking, dark shape moving swiftly through the trees, often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread. In October of 2014, something happened that was unusual because it was officially documented. Call records to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission during the fall of 2014 include a reported sighting of an animal in Benton County, Arkansas. In October 2014, a recorded emergency call received by the AGFC indicates a motorist nearly collided with an unidentified mammal at 9:45 p.m. The motorist described a bear-sized, fast-moving animal with a grayish coat. In December 2015, a viewer sent photos to 40/29 News in Arkansas, claiming that they showed images of the Ozark Howler near Devil's Den State Park. The photos showed a dark animal with horns and red eyes hiding behind some trees. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission reviewed the images and called them a hoax. But the photographs circulated online widely and reignited public interest in the creature. Devil's Den State Park, for what it's worth, sits in the Boston Mountains range of the Ozarks, deep, forested, remote. It is exactly the kind of terrain that keeps showing up in Howler reports. In June of 2016, a group of friends camping in eastern Oklahoma reported hearing prolonged howling in the night and seeing a pair of glowing eyes watching them from the tree line. They did not approach. The eyes, they said, did not move for a long time. And then, as recently as 2022, a man claimed to have spotted a giant black cat he believed to be the Ozark Howler near an abandoned ghost town in Missouri, locking eyes with the beast before it vanished into the forest. So what is it? That is the question everyone comes to eventually, and the answer depends entirely on who you ask. The most conservative explanation is misidentification. The Ozarks have black bears and mountain lions, animals that can produce a sound like a woman screaming. They have large feral hogs, bobcats, and coyotes. Wildlife biologist Keith Stevens of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has said publicly that when his office gets a call about the howler, they treat it the same way they treat a black bear report. Advise the caller to back away slowly and give the animal space. That is practical advice that also quietly implies the commission thinks there's probably an animal out there, even if it's one already in their records. The mountain lion theory is taken seriously by a number of researchers. The eastern cougar was officially declared extinct by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 2011, but unconfirmed sightings of large cats in the Ozarks have continued well past that date. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission records confirmed transient mountain lions in Arkansas from western dispersals, but no established breeding population. So trail cameras across the region have captured large cats that were not supposed to be there. A mountain lion moving through dense woods at night, glimpsed at the edge of headlights or firelight, could easily appear to be something larger and stranger than it is. But that doesn't account for the horns. The horns appear in too many independent accounts to dismiss as a consistent hallucination. Some cryptozoologists have proposed that what people are seeing is a surviving population of a large felid that branched off from known mountain lions, a subspecies or hybrid that developed distinct physical traits in an isolated environment. The Ozarks have been geographically isolated in meaningful ways for thousands of years. Species have diverged in stranger places under stranger circumstances. There is also the red wolf theory, put forward in recent years by wildlife biologist Forrest Galante and his wife Jessica. The North American red wolf is critically endangered, with only a tiny wild population remaining in coastal North Carolina. But red wolves once ranged across the entire southeastern United States, including the Ozarks. They can produce vocalizations that are genuinely unsettling to hear, especially in the reverb of a hollow or a valley. Galante has argued that what generations of Ozark residents have been hearing and occasionally glimpsing may be remnant populations of red wolves, animals that survived in remote pockets longer than the official record acknowledges. And then there's the theory that resists easy categorization, that the Ozark Howler is, in some sense, more than an animal. Folklorist and author Lillian Stone, who grew up in the Ozarks and has written extensively about the region's mythology, describes the creature as something that fits the landscape spiritually as much as geographically. The Ozarks are a place where identities blur and boundaries refuse to hold. The region is simultaneously southern and midwestern, rural and deeply culturally complex, a place that has always resisted being pinned down. In Stone's framing, the Howler is the perfect creature for that kind of place, something that cannot be fully classified, that means different things to different people, that protects and threatens at the same time. To Stone, the Howler serves as a guardian of the rugged Ozarkian landscape. As she puts it, there is no lore about the Howler hurting anyone. It is more like a protector than a predator. That framing actually lines up with the older indigenous traditions, where this kind of creature occupied a guardian role, a presence that kept people from pushing too deep into places they weren't supposed to go. What is striking when you step back and look at the full span of the Howler's history is not the hoaxes or the blurry photographs or the Game and Fish Commission dismissals. Those are easy to find. What is striking is the persistence. 200 years of reports, consistent physical descriptions from people who didn't know each other and weren't reading each other's accounts. A sound that comes up again and again in accounts from the 1800s and accounts from last year, described in almost identical terms. Something deep, something wrong, something that doesn't belong to any animal in the field guide. The Ozarks are big, the hollows are dark, the caves go down farther than anyone has mapped. There is a lot of room out there for something to exist that hasn't sat still long enough to be properly identified. The next time you're driving a back road through the Arkansas Hill Country at night, past the tree line and the darkened fields and the old signage half-eaten by kudzu, crack the window. Listen to what's out there. Listen carefully. Because somewhere in those hills, something has been listening back. Subscribe to Paranormal Depths for the strangest and most compelling cases from around the world.